On the broadcast tonight, Korea's prime minister-designate, amid mounting criticism over alleged pro-Japanese remarks he made in the past, withdraws his nomination. It deals another blow to President Park Geun-hye's efforts to revamp her cabinet. The nation's presidential office finally submits a proposal for confirmation hearings of the president's 8 cabinet minister nominees and the intelligence service chief to parliament. And the international community joins South Korea in stepping up pressure on Japan and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to stop denying Tokyo's past war crimes. We speak to an expert. And on day 12 of the 2014 FIFA World Cup, 4 teams officially make their way into the round of 16. The World Cup at a glance. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green.
늘 남편 먼저, 늘 자식 먼저. 레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다. 한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 1:30 p.m. in Bagram, and 6 on Tuesday, the 24th of June here in Seoul. Hello, this is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Moon Geon-young.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. Well, we're not keeping scores, but back-to-back, President Park is 0 for 2 in nominations for Prime Minister over the past month.
Right, her latest pick, Moon Chang-guk, stepped aside early this Tuesday morning amid criticism over some controversial remarks he made a few years back. Arirang News Choi Yusun starts us off.
Another one of President Park's prime minister nominees has withdrawn before a confirmation hearing, dealing a heavy blow to the president's running of state affairs.
I came to a conclusion that I would be helping President Park by stepping down at this point in time. Today, I'm resigning as the prime minister nominee.
Tuesday's announcement was widely expected after President Park last week delayed a motion to Parliament for a confirmation hearing on the nominee. Moon Chang-guk drew heavy criticism from the public and the ruling and opposition parties for comments he made at his church a few years ago. Moon had said Japan's colonization of the Korean peninsula was part of God's plan to awaken the Korean people, and that he also divided the two Koreas to prevent communism from settling in the south. Before announcing his resignation, Moon, however, stood by his previous defense that his comments were distorted after broadcaster KBS only aired portions of them.
Every individual enjoys freedom of religion. That is a precious basic right. What is wrong with what I said according to my religious beliefs before my nomination?
To politicians on both sides of the aisle that demanded he withdraw, Moon said it is the parliament's duty to govern by law and not by public opinion. Following Moon's announcement, President Park expressed regret that the nominee has missed the chance of public judgment at a hearing. President Park's previous nominee, An Dae-hee, stepped down last month amid allegations he accepted privileges and high earnings in the private sector after retiring as a Supreme Court justice. Her first prime minister nominee, named before she took office, Kim Yong-jun, resigned from allegations of real estate speculation and ethical lapses. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Well, slowly but surely, President Park and his recent nominees for key cabinet posts are making their way towards confirmation hearings. Now, the presidential office today formally asked the National Assembly to hold hearings for 8 cabinet-level designates and the intelligence agency chief.
But as our Kim Young-gi reports, the presidential office would like its pick for finance minister in office sooner rather than later.
President Park Geun-hye approved the request for confirmation hearings for 8 newly nominated cabinet ministers on Tuesday, giving the National Assembly up to 20 days to conclude them. For the presidential office, confirmation can't come soon enough, particularly for Finance Minister nominee Choi Kyung-hye. A leadership vacuum exists in the economic sector, and the government is worried about lost time, as the economy is gripped by fears of a double-dip recession amid slumping domestic demand. Korean consumers are increasingly reluctant to open their wallets, and businesses are shying away from massive investment. Experts say exports could falter if the strengthening of the Korean won continues unabated. The problems underscore the importance of having a finance minister in place, someone who can come up with an extra budget and influence monetary policies. Plans to reform the overall regulatory system, overhaul debt-ridden public enterprises, and boost domestic demand are likely to remain stalled until a new finance minister is installed. The presidential office of Cheongwade hopes that person is nominee Choi Kyung-hye, whose close ties with the president stand to help him push through major policies. But his nomination remains in limbo due to differences among government agencies and a lack of cooperation from the National Assembly. Kim Hyung-gyu, Arirang News.
Well, international anger grows over the Abe administration's efforts to undermine Japan's landmark apology for its use of sex slavery before and during World War II.
And Korea has announced plans to raise international awareness about the highly emotive issue. Our Yurian has more.
For the first time ever, Seoul will publish a comprehensive white paper on Japan's sexual enslavement of women, euphemistically referred to as comfort women during World War II. The government also said it will strengthen private sector cooperation with China to secure historical records on Japan's sexual enslavement of Asian women, and that it has decided to include more information on the issue on the Foreign Ministry homepage. The announcement was made on Monday after Tokyo announced its re-examination on the 1993 Kono Statement, which acknowledged for the first time that the Japanese military forced women into sexual servitude in the early 20th century. Concluding that the statement was a product of intense behind-the-scenes negotiations, Tokyo had suggested it was not backed by historical evidence. The move by Japan has also raised eyebrows outside of Korea. A New York Times editorial titled "Japan's Historical Blinders" said Japanese nationalists will now use the results of the re-examination to retract its previous apology. It added the country cannot be seen as trying to rewrite its past, and that the current actions were interfering with its efforts to play a leading role in the region. And that certainly seems to be the case. China, like Korea, also lashed out against Japan's latest move.
Japan's alleged investigation exposes its true intentions of refusing to face up to history. It's even attempting to whitewash or deny the true intentions of its crimes of invasion.
Historians say up to 200,000 women, mostly from Korea and China, were forced to serve in military brothels during World War II. Yurian, Arirang News.
Well, at a time when constructive relations between Korea and Japan are more important than ever to Asian security, the two countries, allies of the U.S., have been unable to put a very difficult history behind them.
Well, unfortunately, that seems unlikely to change soon, given the release on Friday of a Japanese report on World War II sex slaves. Why is the Abe administration trying to rewrite history, and what does the future of Northeast Asia look like?
Well, for analysis, we are joined live in the studio by Dr. Yang Mo-koo, professor of political science at Norwich University in the U.S. state of Vermont. Professor Koo, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Let's briefly talk about Tokyo's latest review of the 1993 statement. Now, the report appears to raise doubts about the accuracy of that apology because Tokyo says that the document resulted from intense behind-the-scenes negotiations between South Korea and Japan, and it seems to question whether it was really based on solid evidence. What is the Abe administration's intention?
I believe that the Abe administration is aimed at discounting the value of the Kono statement. I think the Kono statement has been an important foundation on which the international community, especially the Koreans, criticize Japan's unapologetic attitudes towards the conflict women issues. The Abe administration also tried to send a message that the Kono statement was not created on the basis of real historical facts. As we know, the conflict women issue is a very internationalized problem that makes the Japanese very shameful in the international community. So the Abe government thought the review of the Kono statement would weaken its responsibility for its past wrongdoings. I also think that we need to see a more comprehensive picture. This event is not solely confined to the conflict women issue. Rather, it is an extension of Japan's conservative or neo-nationalist movement initiated after the mid-1990s. Since the mid-1990s, the conservative Japanese intellectuals and politicians have made every effort to change a self-critical view of their past history into a more positive one. To this end, they have tried to inculcate patriotism among Japanese youth through nationalist education policies and history textbooks. They have tried to make the Japanese youth ready to sacrifice their lives for their countries.
Well, this South Korean government, we responded not as rapidly as the people hoped. The first thing we did was summon the Japanese ambassador and lodge a complaint. We don't know if that's effective enough. And it looks like time and again we don't do enough. And time and again Japan gets away with it. So what can we do in the future to make sure that Japan doesn't use their do or say whatever they want about history and get away with it card?
Unfortunately, I do not think that Korean government has many options to push the Abe administrations to change its stance on Japan's past wrongdoings. Of course, like as a diplomatic pressure, we have to summon the Japanese ambassador to Korea, and then just we have to have the Korean ambassador to Tokyo return to Seoul, which is the strongest diplomatic measure to show complaint. Also, the Korean government needs to make a detailed document to counter the Japanese report that devalued the Kono statement. But no matter what measures the Korean government takes, I do not think that the Abe administration would stop its provocative actions regarding historical issues, because, as I already mentioned, it is part of comprehensive conservative movement initiated after the mid-1990s. So also remember that last December, Prime Minister Abe visited the Yasukuni Shrine, in which the Class A war criminals were enshrined, despite strong resistance from Korea and China, as well as Japanese progressive intellectuals.
Now, part of Japan's shift towards nationalism is its desire to exercise collective self-defense, and by reinterpreting its pacifist and now constitution. Now, some historians and IR experts, international relations experts, have drawn parallel of Japan's case to Germany's way of dealing with its war crimes. What's your take on that?
Right. As we know, it is obviously true that Germany has been much more apologetic than Japan in coming to terms with their past misdeeds. To understand this difference, I think we need to look at several important factors. The first one is kind of structural factors. Like after the end of World War II, the German government, led by the Chancellor Adenauer, desperately needed to be part of Western community by restoring its international reputation and image, devastated by its war crimes such as the Holocaust. So it was closely linked with the increase of national interest for Germany to pay reparations to the Holocaust victims and the newly emerging created Israel. On the other hand, Japan did not have any motives for addressing its war crimes then. As the newly emerging Cold War got steamed, the U.S. suddenly changed its occupation policies from demilitarization and democratization to remilitarization and Japan's economic recovery. The U.S. needed Japan to prevent the diffusion of communism from the Soviet Union. Second, according to existing research, German people were not very penitent on their past wrongdoings in the 1950s and 60s. Instead, they began to seriously tackle their past wrongdoings in the late 1960s when the more progressive party, the Social Democratic Party, led by Chancellor Willy Brandt, took power. The SPD and Chancellor Willy Brandt were very different from the previous conservative political forces. They had strong will to deal with Germany's past wrongs. For example, in the 1970, Chancellor Brandt knelt before the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial in Poland. This event became a very symbolic action for German repentance. On the other hand, Conservative Party, the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan, has maintained its power since the 1955, except for brief rules of non-LDP coalitions during 1993 and 1994 and 2009 to 2012. Conservative politicians who emphasize national pride and confidence did not have any strong motives for addressing their past mistakes and wrongs because it can hurt their political resiliency. Overall, I believe that considering Japan's domestic conditions in the national political structure, it would be really hard for Japan to take a more penitent stance on its past war crimes.
So it seems unlikely that Japan will take a page from Germany's playbook, although we couldn't really compare them side to side in terms of wartime atrocities. But certainly Japan needs to face the facts and be the bigger person from here on and not dwell on their past. Well, Dr. Yang Mo-gu, Professor of Political Science at Norwich University, we thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life, talking with you on air and online, connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Another victim has been recovered from the sunken Seoul ferry, bringing the confirmed death toll from the disaster to 293. 11 others remain unaccounted for 70 days after the ferry sank in waters off southwestern Korea. Officials say the body is that of a female student and she was recovered from the 4th floor of the sunken vessel. The body has been moved to a temporary chapel located in Pyeongmokkang Harbor. DNA testing will be used for identification as her body has been badly decomposed. Divers will resume their search of the ferry once tidal conditions improve. High-level government officials from South and North Korea will meet on Thursday to discuss matters related to the management of the joint Kaesong Industrial Complex. Korea's Unification Ministry said Tuesday that North Korea had agreed to a proposal to restart the talks. It'll be the first time the joint committee in charge of running the park has met since December of last year, when inter-Korean relations soured amid joint South Korea-U.S. military drills. A number of issues will be up for discussion, including the installment of internet services and an electronic access control system. How do Koreans feel about the rise of China as an economic and military power? Well, a new poll suggests many feel threatened, although perceptions about the origin of the threat appear to be shifting. In a survey of 1,000 people conducted by the Asan Institute for Policy Studies, more than 66% of respondents said they felt threatened by China's military expansion. And while the number might be considered high, it does represent quite a drop from just 2 years earlier. The fear of military expansion, however, has been replaced by concerns of China's economic growth. The number of people who said they felt threatened by China's economic might has jumped by nearly 20 percentage points since the year 2012.
South Korea has been operating a provincial reconstruction team in the war-scarred nation of Afghanistan for roughly 4 years now, but on Monday, its mission came to a close. The group has educated and provided medical assistance to thousands of Afghan citizens. Arirang News Hwang Sang-min filed us this report from Afghanistan.
Ramat Bibi says she was devastated when doctors in Afghanistan said her heart disease could not be cured. She received surgery at the Korean hospital in Bagram airfield 1 month ago and is now waiting to return home.
I received medical treatment for 1 year, but I didn't get better. I'm so happy to have recovered here and I can't wait to see my family.
Every day, around 250 Afghans like Ramat visit the Korean hospital in Bagram airfield. The hospital, one of the Korean Provincial Reconstruction Team's reconstruction projects for Afghanistan, has treated some 150,000 Afghans over the last 4 years. The Vocational Training Center is another key project of the Korean PRT that has helped change the lives of people like Faisal Safi, a student turned teacher at the center's electricity department.
My life has completely changed since 4 or 5 years that I've been here. Because I'm an electrician, I can get a job very easily to support my family.
The Korean PRT, consisting of the government, the military, and the private sector, completed its mission in Afghanistan on Monday local time. Since 2010, it has dispatched a total of 2,500 personnel to share Korea's development experience in the fields of health, education, rural development, and governance.
We are the only aid recipient country to have turned into a donor country. This was clearly demonstrated in Afghanistan. Our activity has given hope to Afghans and became a source of pride for Koreans.
And while the PRT era has come to an end, Korea's mission to secure lasting stability in Afghanistan does not end here.
The Korean hospital in Bagram Airfield and the Vocational Training Center will remain open to assist those in need as Afghanistan continues its reconstruction efforts. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News, Bagram.
Well, for some teams, advancing out of the group stage at the World Cup involves complex scenarios and FIFA tiebreakers.
Well, for one team, advancing is quite simple and it involves one name, Neymar, doesn't it, Jisun?
Viva Brazil in Brasilia. The host nation crushed Cameroon 4-1 in their capital in their 100th World Cup game. And this one goes to squad superstar Neymar, whose double kept his country perched at the top of Group A. Neymar's goal in the 70th minute made another piece of history, as it was the 100th goal at this year's World Cup. After scoring 2 brilliant goals in the first half, Neymar was taken off in the second half to give him some rest before the next match. His fellow countrymen Fred and Fernandinho also got on the score sheet to give Brazil a convincing victory. Neymar is the top scorer at the moment with 4 goals. 5 other strikers, including Thomas Müller of Germany and Robin van Persie of the Netherlands, are closely behind with 3 goals each. Elsewhere in the group, Mexico beat Croatia 3-1 to advance to round of 16 for 6th consecutive time. Spain wrapped up their World Cup with a 3-0 victory over Australia. Both of them now have a long flight home to think about. After already having secured their spots in the second stage, the Netherlands beat Chile 2-0, which means they avoid going up against Brazil in the last 16. The knockout stage kicks off this weekend, starting with Brazil and Chile facing off at Belo Horizonte at 1 p.m. local time on Saturday. And Mexico and the Netherlands will hold their match at Fortaleza at the same time on Sunday. As you can see, teams from Latin America are currently outperforming the rest. European squad, on the other hand, Croatia, England, Spain, and Bosnia-Herzegovina will be packing their bags and flying across the Atlantic in the coming days. And here's a look at today's games. The verdict will be out for Group C and D on this Tuesday. Tied on 3 points, Uruguay must beat Italy to advance from Group D. With just Colombia short to advance from Group C, it will be an all-out battle between Greece and Côte d'Ivoire to join them. And that was your look at the latest from the World Cup. I'll see you guys back here for more updates.
You know, the weather was just crazy here in the nation's capital yesterday, but today was pretty okay, right? Well, for what the Mother Nature has in store for us, let's turn to our Michelle Park. Michelle, we finally got to see the sun today.
That's right, and good evening. Today is actually a Midsummer's Eve in North Africa, which is a day to celebrate the power of the sun. That just so happens to coincide with the longest day of the year, and here in Korea, we finally got to see the sun again today after the rainy and cloudy days.
How's tomorrow looking? Is still rain in the forecast?
No rain is in the forecast for tomorrow, just a cloudy day with hot temperatures nationwide. However, we can expect more sporadic showers on Jeju Island on Wednesday thanks to the monsoonal front. And meanwhile, the rain is in the forecast in Brazil tomorrow in some regions with hot, humid conditions, while it's looking more favorable in Belo Horizonte and Cuiabá. Now going over to our tomorrow's readings, Seoul will top out at 18 in the morning and reach up to 30 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 31 and 24 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 24, Dokdo at 22, while Mangungang tops out at 18. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park Geun. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Michelle. And that's all from us for today. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gon-young. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day. And we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.